On June 6, 2015, two convicted murderers vanished from one of America's most secure prisons. Richard Matt and David Sweat didn't just escape. They pulled off something out of a Hollywood movie. They cut through steel walls, crawled through steam pipes, and tunneled through a maze of underground passages, all with help from someone on the inside. But here's the twist. A prison employee fell in love, and that forbidden romance led to one of the most shocking manhunts in modern American history. This is the story of the Dannemora escape. Clinton Correctional Facility in Dannemora, New York isn't just any prison. It's known as Little Siberia, a maximum security fortress built in 1845, located just 20 miles from the Canadian border. The prison sits in the remote Adirondack Mountains where winter temperatures drop to -30 degrees. For over 170 years, it held New York's most dangerous criminals, and for more than a century, no one had ever escaped from its high-security section. Until Richard Matt and David Sweat changed everything. These weren't petty criminals. Matt was a brutal killer and talented artist, serving 25 years to life for kidnapping, torturing, and murdering his former boss. Sweat was even more dangerous, serving life without parole for shooting a sheriff's deputy 22 times on July 4, 2002. Both men were considered extremely violent, extremely cunning, and extremely desperate. But what made this escape truly extraordinary wasn't just the elaborate tunnel they dug, or the power tools they used, or even the 3-week manhunt that followed. It was the woman who helped them. Joyce Mitchell, a married prison tailor who smuggled tools, planned getaway routes, and was manipulated into betraying everything, all because she fell for a prisoner's charm. This is the complete story of how two murderers seduced a prison employee, tunneled out of a maximum security facility, and terrorized upstate New York for 23 days. To understand this escape, you first need to understand who Richard Matt and David Sweat really were. These weren't misunderstood criminals. They were cold-blooded killers. Richard Matt was born in 1966 and had been in and out of prison his entire adult life. By his 30s, he'd racked up convictions for assault, burglary, and robbery. But in 1997, Matt crossed a line he could never come back from. He kidnapped his former boss, William Rickerson, a 76-year-old businessman in upstate New York. Matt tortured Rickerson for 27 hours, breaking his fingers, his neck, beating him savagely. Then he dismembered the body and hid the remains. Matt fled to Mexico, where he killed another man in a bar fight. Mexican authorities extradited him back to New York in 2007, where he was convicted of murder and sentenced to 25 years to life. But here's what made Matt dangerous beyond his violence. He was charming, manipulative, and talented. Matt was a gifted artist who painted elaborate portraits and landscapes. Prison staff loved his work. He'd gift paintings to guards, to employees, to anyone who could do him favors. And those favors added up. David Sweat was younger but arguably more dangerous. Born in 1980, Sweat's criminal record started in his teens. On July 4, 2002, when he was just 22 years old, Sweat and two accomplices broke into a gun store in Pennsylvania and stole firearms. As they transferred the stolen guns in a parking lot back in New York, Broome County Sheriff's Deputy Kevin Tarsha spotted them. What happened next was cold-blooded murder. Sweat shot Deputy Tarsha 15 times with a rifle, then walked up to the dying officer and shot him 7 more times with a handgun. A total of 22 bullets. Sweat showed no remorse. At his trial, he smiled. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He was 22 years old, and he would die behind bars. Or so everyone thought. By 2015, both Matt and Sweat were housed in the Honor Block at Clinton Correctional Facility, a privileged unit for inmates with good behavior. They had access to cooking stations, televisions, telephones, showers, and common areas. They could move around more freely than general population inmates. And that freedom, combined with their intelligence and desperation, became deadly. Her name was Joyce Mitchell, and she was about to make the worst decision of her life. Joyce was 51 years old, married to Lyle Mitchell, a fellow employee at Clinton Correctional. She'd worked at the prison for years as a tailor supervisor in the prison's industrial shop, where inmates learned skills like sewing and garment work. Joyce wasn't a criminal. She had no record. She was described by co-workers as friendly, hard-working, and unremarkable. But she was lonely, and Richard Matt saw that loneliness like a predator sees weakness. Matt began working in the tailor shop in 2013. He was charming, funny, talented. He complimented Joyce. He painted her pictures. He made her feel special, seen, appreciated. Slowly, carefully, Matt drew her in. And then David Sweat joined the shop as well. The two inmates began working Joyce like a long con. Investigators would later discover that Joyce Mitchell became sexually involved with both men. She admitted to having a sexual relationship with Matt inside the prison, in the tailor shop, hidden from cameras. Sweat also manipulated her emotionally, though the extent of their physical relationship remained unclear. What is clear is that both men used her, played on her emotions, her insecurities, her desperate need for attention. And then, they asked her for a favor. Just a small one at first. Smuggle in some hacksaw blades hidden in frozen hamburger meat. Joyce hesitated, but Matt was persuasive. He told her he loved her. He told her they'd run away together once he escaped. He told her Lyle, her husband, was in the way. Matt gave Joyce pills to drug Lyle so that after the escape, Matt and Sweat could kill him. Then Joyce and Matt would disappear together, start a new life. It was insane. It was manipulative. And Joyce Mitchell believed it. But Joyce wasn't the only prison employee they corrupted. A corrections officer named Gene Palmer also helped. Palmer admired Matt's artwork and wanted paintings for himself. In exchange, Palmer smuggled tools into the prison, moved Matt to cells closer to Sweat, and looked the other way. Palmer later claimed he didn't know about the escape plan, but investigators found he'd been compromised, bribed with art and friendship. The stage was set. Two killers had the tools, the access, and the inside help. Now they just needed time. The escape plan was breathtakingly elaborate, something straight out of the Shawshank Redemption. And it took months to execute. Matt and Sweat's cells were in the honor block, side by side. Behind their cells was a utility corridor, a narrow catwalk space that ran behind the entire cell block. If they could break through the back walls of their cells, they could access that corridor. From there, they could move freely through the prison's infrastructure, its pipes, its tunnels, its forgotten spaces. But breaking through those walls required tools. Joyce Mitchell smuggled in hacksaw blades, chisels, and drill bits, hidden in frozen meat that she'd bring into the tailor shop. The inmates would retrieve the tools, hide them in their cells, and return them to contractors' toolboxes after use so no one noticed they were missing. It was brilliant and audacious. Every night after the 10:30 p.m. bed check, Matt and Sweat would begin their work. They used the tools to cut through the steel bars at the back of their cells. Then they chipped away at the concrete and brick behind the bars. The noise was loud, metal on metal, scraping, grinding. But they timed their work carefully, and the honor block was far enough from guard stations that no one heard. To hide their progress during daily inspections, they created false walls. Using paint and materials from the tailor shop, they built facades that looked like solid cell walls. Guards would shine flashlights into the cells and see nothing unusual. Meanwhile, behind those fake walls, gaping holes led into the prison's guts. Once inside the utility corridor, Matt and Sweat faced their next challenge, navigating a maze of catwalks, pipes, and tunnels beneath the prison. They explored at night, memorizing routes, testing paths. Eventually, they discovered a large steam pipe, 6 feet in diameter, that ran underground toward the prison's outer wall. They cut into that steam pipe using more smuggled tools. The pipe was scalding hot, used to heat the facility, but they worked around the heat. Inside the pipe they crawled, cutting through sections of metal as they went. It was cramped, suffocating, dangerous. One wrong move and they'd be boiled alive. But they pressed on. Finally, the steam pipe led them to the prison's outer perimeter, beyond the walls. From there, they accessed the Dannemora village sewer system. All they had to do was cut through one final manhole cover, and they'd be free. The entire escape route, from their cells, through the corridor, down into the tunnels, through the steam pipe, and into the sewers, was over 500 feet long. It took them months to complete. And no one noticed. June 5th, 2015. Everything was ready. The tunnel was complete. Joyce Mitchell had agreed to pick them up at midnight with a getaway car packed with supplies, weapons, tents, camping gear, everything they'd need to disappear into the wilderness or flee to Mexico. After the 10:30 p.m. bed check, Matt and Sweat made their move. They placed decoys in their beds, bundles of clothing shaped like sleeping bodies. It wasn't as elaborate as Alcatraz's dummy heads, but in the dim light of the honor block, it would buy them time. They squeezed through the holes in their cell walls and entered the utility corridor. From there, they descended into the tunnels beneath the prison, following the route they'd practiced for months. They crawled through the steam pipe, the heat unbearable, the metal scorching their hands, but they pushed through. At the end of the tunnel, they reached the manhole cover. Using a wrench and brute force, they pried it open. Cool night air rushed in. They climbed out into the street, just one block outside the prison walls in the quiet village of Dannemora. They were free. But Joyce Mitchell never showed up. According to her later confession, Joyce had a panic attack. The reality of what she was doing, betraying her husband, aiding murderers, running away with killers, hit her all at once. She felt chest pains and thought she was having a heart attack. She stayed home. She never came. Matt and Sweat waited in the darkness near the manhole. Minutes passed. Then an hour. No Joyce. No car. No supplies. They realized they'd been abandoned. So they did the only thing they could. They ran. On foot. With no supplies, no weapons, no plan. They disappeared into the dense Adirondack wilderness toward the Canadian border. Behind them, the prison slept. No one knew they were gone. At 5:30 am on June 6, 2015, guards conducted the morning bed check. They counted inmates in the honor block. 2 were missing, Richard Matt and David Sweat. Guards rushed to their cells. They pulled back the blankets and found the decoys. Immediately, they saw the holes in the back walls. Alarms blared. The prison went into lockdown. Within minutes, every law enforcement agency in New York was notified. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo arrived at the prison that morning. He personally walked through the escape route with cameras following him. He crawled through the tunnels, saw the cut steam pipes, emerged from the manhole in the street. Cuomo looked shaken. He told reporters this was, quote, the first escape from the maximum security section of Clinton Correctional in over 100 years. The realization set in quickly. 2 extremely dangerous convicted murderers were on the loose. They had a 7-hour head start. They could be anywhere. In the woods, heading for Canada, hiding in a cabin or already out of state. And they were desperate. A massive manhunt began. Over 1,000 law enforcement officers descended on the area. State police, local sheriffs, U.S. Marshals, Border Patrol agents, FBI. They set up roadblocks, checkpoints, search perimeters. Helicopters scanned the forests. Bloodhounds tracked scents. Schools closed. Residents locked their doors. The entire region was on high alert. But Matt and Sweat had vanished into 16,000 square miles of wilderness. As the manhunt intensified, investigators turned their focus inward. How did 2 inmates tunnel out of a maximum security prison undetected? Someone had to have helped them. It didn't take long to find Joyce Mitchell. On June 12th, just 6 days after the escape, authorities arrested her. At first, she denied everything. But under interrogation, she broke. She confessed to smuggling tools, to planning the getaway, to the sexual relationship with Matt, to everything. She also revealed the darkest part of the plan. Matt had given her pills to drug her husband, Lyle. The plan was for Matt and Sweat to kill Lyle after the escape, so Joyce and Matt could run away together. But Joyce couldn't go through with it. She threw the pills away. On the night of the escape, she panicked and stayed home. Joyce Mitchell was charged with promoting prison contraband and criminal facilitation. She pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 7 years in prison. She was also fined and ordered to pay nearly $80,000 in restitution. Corrections officer Gene Palmer was also arrested. Palmer admitted to smuggling tools and doing favors for Matt in exchange for paintings. He was sentenced to 6 months in prison. But the fallout didn't stop there. An inspector general's investigation later found that, quote, long-standing systemic failures in management and oversight enabled 2 convicted murderers to orchestrate their escape almost in plain sight. 20 prison employees were found to have failed in their duties. Some were fired. Others faced disciplinary action. The prison's culture of corruption and complacency had allowed this to happen. But while investigators unraveled the inside job, Matt and Sweat were still out there. And the clock was ticking. For 3 weeks, Richard Matt and David Sweat evaded one of the largest manhunts in modern U.S. history. They moved through the Adirondack wilderness, breaking into cabins for food and supplies, stealing weapons, and staying just ahead of search teams. Early in the manhunt, authorities found evidence near a hunting cabin, 20 miles west of the prison. Dina confirmed Matt and Sweat had been there. They'd stolen food, liquor, and camping gear. The search radius expanded. As days turned into weeks, tensions rose. Residents reported break-ins, missing items, strange sounds in the woods. Some claimed to have seen the fugitives. Every lead sent hundreds of officers scrambling into the dense forest, but Matt and Sweat kept slipping away. Then, on June 24th, nearly 3 weeks after the escape, a major break. A man in Malone, New York, about 30 miles from the prison, heard a noise in his hunting cabin. He saw someone inside and called police. Officers surrounded the area. It was Richard Matt. Alone. Matt had separated from Sweat days earlier. The two had argued, Sweat later revealed, because Matt was drinking too much and slowing them down. They split up. Matt continued west, while Sweat headed toward the Canadian border. When officers confronted Matt on June 26th near Malone, he was armed with a shotgun. He refused to surrender. A U.S. Border Patrol agent shot and killed him. Richard Matt, 49 years old, died in the woods, just 30 miles from where he'd escaped. But David Sweat was still out there. 2 days later, on June 28th, a New York State Police sergeant spotted a man jogging along a road near the Canadian border, just 2 miles from freedom. It was David Sweat. The sergeant, Jay Cook, ordered Sweat to stop. Sweat ran. Cook fired twice, hitting Sweat in the torso. Sweat collapsed. He was taken into custody, rushed to a hospital, and survived. After 23 days on the run, the manhunt was over. David Sweat was back in prison, this time in a cell where he'd never see daylight again. The 2015 Dannemora escape became one of the most infamous prison breaks in modern American history. It exposed catastrophic failures in the prison system, corruption among staff, and the disturbing ease with which 2 convicted murderers manipulated their way to freedom. Richard Matt and David Sweat's escape was compared to Alcatraz to Shawshank Redemption to the great escapes of history. And in terms of sheer audacity and planning, it deserves that comparison. They cut through steel and concrete, navigated underground tunnels, crawled through scalding steam pipes, and emerged from a manhole in the street, all while prison staff had no idea. But what makes this escape truly chilling is Joyce Mitchell, a woman with no criminal record, a stable job, a husband, fell so deeply under the spell of a manipulative killer that she was willing to help him murder her own husband. Mitchell later said she was, quote, in over her head and didn't realize what she was doing. But investigators believe Matt used classic manipulation tactics. Love bombing, emotional control, and promises of a fantasy future to bend her to his will. Joyce Mitchell served her sentence and was released in 2020 after 5 years in prison. She now lives quietly, largely out of the public eye. Gene Palmer, the corrections officer, also served his sentence. and was released. David Sweat remains in prison, locked in a special unit where he's under constant surveillance. He'll never be eligible for parole. He'll die in prison. The escape led to sweeping reforms at Clinton Correctional Facility. Security was overhauled. Staff training was reformed. Oversight was increased. Governor Cuomo ordered a full investigation, and the resulting report was damning, revealing decades of mismanagement, corruption, and complacency. In 2018, Showtime produced a critically acclaimed miniseries called Escape at Dannemora, directed by Ben Stiller, and starring Patricia Arquette, Benicio del Toro, and Paul Dano. The series dramatized the escape and brought the story back into the national spotlight. Today, Clinton Correctional Facility still operates in Dannemora, holding over 2,600 inmates. The manhole cover Matt and Sweat emerged from is still there, a silent reminder of the night two killers did the impossible. Tour guides in the area still tell the story. The tunnels have been sealed, but the legend remains. The Dannemora escape proves that even in the 21st century, with cameras, alarms, and high-tech security, human corruption and desperation can still crack the system wide open. Richard Matt and David Sweat didn't escape because they were smarter than the system. They escaped because the system failed. And that's the most terrifying part of all. What do you think? Could something like this happen again? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, subscribe to the Escape Files for more legendary prison escapes every week. Thanks for watching.